the thing that I always kind of get stuck on is when people say I'm on ECC and I got to wait for S4 because it always feels like, oh, there's so much you could do right now because there is that opportunity. But people have got this mindset, and I guess we all do, right? It's like, oh, that's old, this is new, this is where I'm going, so I guess I have to wait. And there's so much opportunity to begin right now. People get tolerant of doing things in a certain way, and there's a future state where maybe they will get to when they can start today. So to your question of the differences on ECC and S4, I mean, it is a decision that we made early on because we want people to start with where they're at today.
Thanks again for joining another edition of the never-ending climb for stronger supply chain and procurement for companies running SAP. With me today, we have Brad Braun. He is our head of product engineering, product development, and he has years of experience figuring out what the heck is a baddie. And it is not what he thought it was, but it is how, Brad is here to share with us a little bit more about how the heck we build products for SAP that follow clean core, they're upgradable, you install them, uninstall them, they run on BTP, etc. Make sure that we build it right. And that takes a lot of extra time and energy. Brad, thanks so much for joining today. And please take it away and tell us about what's tricky about how I've challenged you and the team to build products, add-ons for SAP.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Sean. It's good to be here. I've had the pleasure of being part of the Convergent team for a while here now. So, as Sean said, there's a lot of things along the way when we have a challenge to build a new product or to build solutions or to meet the client's problems that they're bringing forward to us. First and foremost, we are having to figure out how do I make this work on the system that they currently are at. A lot of our clients are on a journey towards S4, but they're currently on ECC. And so we have to take on that challenge of what's it going to take to get this working first on ECC and certify it so that it is S4 ready and can be moved forward as they move forward in the landscape. It takes a little bit of extra effort to make sure that we still meet all the performance requirements and leverage the APIs that are going to be available in both different ways. We have to maintain several landscapes to make sure that we can test all of this as we go. But we found a lot of success on that and helping people start with where they're at today. And then as we're working through the different solutions and the requirements, we've learned a lot about making sure that we are building solutions that are very observant, let's say, of what their configuration is and how they are using the system. Because it's one of the things we discovered very early on, of course, is that it's so important to make sure we have solutions that adapt well to the landscape, to the industry, to the configuration that an organization has so that these solutions are ready to go and are working from what their system is configured to do, as opposed to anything being hard coded. That's always been a significant no-no for us of making sure that there's not a situation where we're saying this is how this has to be or it only works in certain scenarios. So trying to make sure that we are very adaptable to the organizations and what they need to do.
And there's all of the certification checklists that we have to honor and all of the code guidelines of making sure that security is honored and all of these other things, configuration. And then if you start on ECC, that it upgrades seamlessly, or if you're doing a greenfield, you can install the same thing in your new greenfield system and keep that user experience consistent between the two. Even if it was a greenfield or a brownfield or a bluefield, it doesn't actually matter. You're able to take that solution with you. And, the whole team keeps coming up and meeting that challenge. So I want to thank you guys for that. I know it's not easy.
Yeah, and I mean, so many other aspects of it too, as it relates to. I know I focused more on how do we get things working with between ECC and S4, and as you correctly pointed out, all the different certification things that are required to achieve those goals, making solutions that follow the standard practice that SAP has for add-ons and how they get put in, how we honor the clean core and make sure that we are putting things in the right way and that we have a solution that can be easily installed and where necessary or where we need to change gears, uninstalled. It maintains that sort of a capsulated solution that is brought into an environment, and it's very clear how to bring that forward from point A to point B. And then on the not focusing just on the back end for a second, but even just that following and adherence to Fiori design guidelines, making sure that we have solutions that fit well within an organization's landscape. So it's not like their users come in and they go, oh, this is a different one. This is by this other organization or whatever, but rather having a landscape that looks homogeneous. It's like this is SAP. SAP is what runs everything there. And so it may as well look like SAP throughout, regardless of what kind of solution you're putting forward into your system.
And it's the new SAP, not the old SAP, not our dad's ERP. What what I
Yes.
what I love about that is it means that we've had to do the work to go and create something that is valuable, certified, clean core, etc., across multiple customers, even across multiple industries, which I know is not easy. I really
Mm.
appreciate that. And it's part of the challenge that I know keeps getting laid down for you and the team to go and keep adding to the product suite. And it keeps getting bigger and bigger over time. We started with a handful of apps and those became really well packaged and upgradable and supported. And then before you know it, there's a whole suite of things. One of my
Mm.
favorite compliments came from a leader at one of our customers. They're new at the organization and they're just figuring things out. And I said, well, you've already got some of our software. And they said, oh, that app? No, that's from SAP. And I said, nope. You want to see the license? And that was such a compliment when they're like, no, that's from SAP. I'm like, nope, nope, that's us. We provide that. But I love that you didn't realize that because that's perfect. It's almost
Yeah.
perfectly Canadian too, because we're, showing up, making things better and not bragging about it. When you're building something, I'm hoping that there's some of the IT leadership and some of the supply chain leaders that are watching this, and they're going, man, when we ask for something and somebody says, well, no, we're doing an S4 and we can't do anything until we get there. Because I know there's this myth out there that you can't do anything for ECC and take it with you, which doesn't make sense. So, how hard is it to build for ECC and S4? I mean, can you share a little bit more about some of the research, the place that we look, like the simplification list, and how many different systems we've got across different versions? What does that look like? How much energy and time does that take up?
I think the first thing that came to mind when you were talking about that, Sean, is the thing that I always kind of get stuck on is when people say I'm on ECC and I got to wait for S4 because it always feels like, oh, there's so much you could do right now because there is that opportunity. But people have got this mindset, and I guess we all do, right? It's like, oh, that's old, this is new, this is where I'm going, so I guess I have to wait. And there's so much opportunity to begin right now. People get tolerant of doing things in a certain way, and there's a future state where maybe they will get to when they can start today. So to your question of the differences on ECC and S4, I mean, it is a decision that we made early on because we want people to start with where they're at today. It does take more effort because we're looking at it from the perspective we're not in a HANA database yet. We don't have some of the convenience of CDS views. We don't have some of the performance. So we have to invest on making sure that we are creating solutions that are performant. We got to create a lot more of the services and such directly. But on the flip side, we're giving people a path where they can start today. And then as we can take advantage of those beautiful things that are part of S4HANA, that is now a path forward to get there. But they can start today and not have to wait for some future date. And then we design things. Also, it's really important as well when we're looking at where a client or where an organization is today. Sometimes we are all this way. We create a little mess over here or something that we need to deal with, or we thought we had to do it in a certain way. So helping organizations to identify those and go, no, but it's not a mess. It's actually really required for your code. It's just not where we want it to be. And helping them to leverage SAP technology. I mean, we've got this beautiful thing with SAP Business Technology Platform and being able to build extensions where we're now putting them outside of the core and just providing that beautiful user experience and leveraging API and talking into the core to extract certain pieces of information too.
Yeah, it's that side by side extension where when the capability's not there in one version or another, you've created over on the side as a side by side capability to bring that in and keep things clean. So,
Mhm.
Brad, I think one of the things as a myth that we often run into is somebody says, oh, well, we need an app for this. And somebody says, oh, we'll just do the low code thing. And, there's this amazing things that you could do with that. And, sometimes somebody says, oh, it's just going to be 3 weeks. And then there's a couple of oh, yeah, 3 weeks. Okay. I'll give you a call in 3 months and, we'll talk about how it's going. And that,
Yeah.
that turns into like 9, 12, 18 months later, somebody that said it was going to be 3 weeks is still squirreling away, trying to, fill out, make sure that it finishes working for the 80, 90% use case. What are some of those catches that really give people a false sense of confidence when they're going into some of this stuff where through experience you've had the opportunity to learn better? What are some of those things that catch people and have somebody somewhere come up with it'll only take 3 weeks as an idea, but it really goes way longer?
When we talk about something like that, the thing that always comes first to my mind is my approach to any home renovation project that I've ever done, where it's like, I think I could do that, and it always takes longer. And it's the same kind of principle, right? There's like so many things that maybe we don't quite account for. So, when I think about the examples you're giving, it happens all over the place. We always go, oh, that should be possible. And we start with what's a simple idea. I'm a developer at by background and at heart too, so I often go, oh, I bet you I could solve this problem. But we start from a little simple problem, and yes, we can create something that is demoable. So even over a weekend, a hackathon kind of approach, right? You take shortcuts, you hard code things, you follow a golden path scenario that could demo really, really well. But then someone says, I kind of like that. Okay, well, shoot, now it's beyond the weekend, and now I need to start thinking about security. I have to start thinking about performance. I have to start thinking about, well, I'm working on this mock data or small data set on a development system. Shoot, production is obviously factors larger than that, and it has to perform well in that system. It's got to deal with the configuration. Again, now we're at that hard coded thing. And if we've got something that is adaptive to the documents and the way those are laid out, the core configuration in SAP in terms of what is valid in terms of actions that can be taken or things that should be suppressed based on the way that the SAP system is configured, it all starts to grow. And then beyond that, then you realize that, okay, we managed to get through that and we managed to add all these different pieces on there. But we were kind of rushed, and it took us like 10 times longer than we thought it was going to. And now we're just pushing it through to production. And thank goodness we're done with that. Now everybody's got it, and they're like, well, I also need this feature, or we didn't account for that, or rewinding, we didn't actually do a design process on this where we engage stakeholders. And that's, of course, a huge part of our process. It drives everything that we do to make sure that the stakeholders are all involved well in advance of that ever hitting a production state, because those are the people that are going to adopt this. And if they're not adopting it, you kind of failed regardless of how much time you spent on
It's
it.
Yeah, it really comes through in the design, doesn't it? Right? There's the design from
Yeah.
multiple perspectives. There's the technical design. And I know one of the things that we run into often is an organization that has coded their way through a problem. And instead of configuring most of what they need and then adding some pieces to reinforce, making it really simple, you end up often coding over a problem. And it's part of that hybrid team to go in and look at all of the different angles of, call it the functional side, the technical side, the human side, the business
Yeah.
process side, and then do that across multiple versions. And it's quite a matrix to work through. And so,
Mm.
hats off to you and the team for continuing to create, deliver more software add-ons and helping us on our journey to be the number one add-on for SAP Procure to Pay. Thank you again, Brad, for joining us today to share some of what you've learned, what's tricky, and some things to think about through the journey. And I hope everybody would join us again next week for another edition of The Never Ending Climb for stronger supply chain and procurement for companies running SAP. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sean.